It's Friday, the 5th of June, 2020, day 85 of the new normal at Santa Monica College.
This is the Pandemic Podcast, your twice-a-week news and culture guide to surviving and thriving in the age of coronavirus. I'm Glenn Zuckman.
And I'm Jackie Sedley. Today on the podcast, College Journalism. We're joined by the Corsair's faculty advisors and three people that I've spent a lot of virtual time with over this pandemic. Journalist Sharyn Obsatz and Ashanti Blaize-Hopkins, and photojournalist Gerard Burkhart. Sharyn, Ashanti, and Gerard, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah.
So today is the last day of a disrupted semester at Santa Monica College in America and on this earth. A couple of months ago, I thought that maybe the sudden and unexpected death of Kobe Bryant would be the most shocking thing that happened in 2020, and now January 26th seems like almost a lifetime ago. So much has happened, and yet, you know, we knew a pandemic was coming. We didn't know this year. Bill Gates had his famous 2015 TED Talk. George Floyd, sadly, is hardly the first Black American murdered by police, and so all of these recent events we could have known. Maybe as Californians, we were thinking too much about earthquakes and fires and not enough about pandemics and racism, but somehow here we are in this 2020 zeitgeist of turbulence. Ashanti, you actually did expect this semester to be disrupted. You planned to teach for half a semester and then go on maternity leave for half a semester. So unlike most of us, you did expect a disruption, but I don't know if you anticipated a pandemic in George Floyd. Are you surviving? Are you thriving? How are you making sense of this 2020 zeitgeist of turbulence?
I mean, I think I'm fortunate that I have a really fantastic way to I can't even find words. It's been interesting. You know, having a baby though makes it easier because I have to focus on raising a little human, and I have two kids, and my husband's home, and so we're all home anyway. So I think it would have been different maybe if I didn't have the new baby, if, we were just trying to make it day by day. But I think our days are so jam-packed at this point. You know, my husband and I woke up this morning, we looked at each other and we were like, what day is it? And I was like, it's Thursday. He's like, how was it Thursday? And so I think, we're in a very unique situation where we have distractions. We have a lot of distractions in our home. 3-year-old and an infant.
You may be the first person ever to utter the sentence, having a baby makes it easier.
Right. Right. I mean, because I will say, being pregnant during a pandemic, was not great at all. And I think I was more, angsty and anxious and frightened, to be honest with you, while I was pregnant than once the baby was here. The whole George Floyd thing, my husband and I were talking about it this morning, and one of the things that I told him was, we've been here before. This is nothing new for Black people. It's just exhausting, but it's nothing new. So even with the arrest of the 4 officers that were involved in the incident with George Floyd, we've been there before, right? So we've had arrests before. We've had indictments before to send the case to trial. I think the real test is going to be, once the trial happens, to see if there are any convictions. And if there aren't, I think we're going to be right back where we are right now.
For you, Gerard, I know that your semester started with a couple of personal turbulence going on, including a fire in your home. And I remember on the first day, that was kind of the notice that you had given me that the semester might be a little less in touch for you.
Yeah.
So how have things been since that happened in this transition alongside that going on?
I kind of, having a fire made things easier, if I could borrow from Ashanti. It's like, all right, you don't have to be so focused on the troubles that you're seeing every day, outside in the world. You've got some other things that are a distraction. Just like teaching itself was kind of an anchor. I thought I was giving students an anchor and a place to go to express themselves. And really, at the end of the semester, like they were my anchor through everything. So I think it's really interesting how in troubling times, people can really, grow and bond together in really, really strong ways, which what I've seen at the Corsair. You know, I think it's really been a growth thing for everybody.
Sharyn, you knew you were going to come in and fill in for Ashanti for the second half of the semester. Once again, you didn't know there was going to be a pandemic. What's your experience coming into the Corsair in general, and obviously under these circumstances, been?
You know, in my life, I've rolled with a lot of changes. You know, I was in the Peace Corps in Paraguay. I lived in New Mexico. I lived in California. I grew up in Minnesota. You know, I have a kid. So for me, I tend to see myself as someone who's pretty laid back and can kind of roll with things. It's nice to not have to commute, right? I can't live anywhere near Santa Monica because it's so expensive. So that part has been good. I would say, along with what Gerard mentioned, I've just been really impressed with the students. And, you know, I'm teaching 7 classes right now, right? And they're all very different. So I have a J1, a J2, 2 sections of Media 10, and then I have, J16, J17. So for me, I think, and Ashanti will tell you, I'm always the worst about grading. So grading is kind of the thing that I've done the least of. Overall, this is my son's friends calling him on the iPad that I brought into my room. So
Can't escape it. There's no escape from it.
I know. His friends from Facebook Messenger are calling him. So as far as adjusting to the Corsair, I think it's been fine. I agree with Gerard in that it does give my life meaning. There's a lot of things in the world that I can't fix or I can't control. I'm someone who loves to fix things. And there's a lot that are beyond my control, but I can control how I respond to my students and what they're going through. And I can also control the little things that I can do to help students. There's a student in Scholars who's worried about, will he get kicked out of Scholars because of his grades this semester? And that's something that I can help with. Right, I can reach out to Scholars, explain what's going on, and make sure he doesn't get kicked out of Scholars next year. So the little things, I really appreciate the small things that I'm able to do during this time, because the bigger picture things, right, the institutional racism, the pandemic, I have a lot less control over those things, I would say.
Mm-hmm. You 3 are the 3 most kind of empathetic and in-touch professors I've personally ever had. And I know that throughout the semester, just the same that you say that the students have been an anchor for you, you 3 have definitely been anchors for me in one way or another. I know that I'm definitely guilty of still calling Ashanti, even though she's supposed to be on leave, and talking to all of you at times when it probably isn't convenient. For the 3 of you, whether on leave or not, whether starting at the semester or closing it off now, how have you kind of seen students grow and change throughout all of this? How have you seen your connection and your ability to keep this community of the Corsair afloat, or how have you seen the students keep it afloat? Starting with Ashanti, and then we'll go down the line.
I can tell you that right after the George Floyd incident happened, and this was after 2 other events, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, after those things happened in succession, I literally woke up at 1 o'clock in the morning one night and was very concerned about how the Black students on the staff of the Corsair were dealing with all of this, because I knew what was going on in my head, and I knew, as someone who had been a professional journalist, how difficult it would have been for me to cover this story. And so I could only imagine how the students were feeling. And so I reached out to all of them via email, and one by one they started responding. And what I got was, we're not okay. And for me, it struck a chord. It was heartbreaking. And I immediately said, okay, we got to have a conversation. We have to be able to create a safe space where everyone can share what they're going through. We can talk about the incident. We can talk about what's going on in the world. We can talk about the protests. We can talk about experiences to be able to start the journey of moving forward in a positive direction, and also give people a little bit of a feeling that they're not alone in what they're feeling, that, there isn't a good quick answer to this. and that's okay, but we have to keep talking. And so that's when I reached out to you, Jackie, and Jack, your managing editor. And I said, listen, I'm thinking of doing something. Wanted to run it by you guys first because I knew it was supposed to be your production day. And if you guys weren't 100% on board, I was probably going to still do it, but just do it a different day. And then I reached out to Sharyn and Gerard and said, look, I'm going to do this. I think it needs to be done. You know, our students are hurting, and I think they're hurting in ways that they're not even vocalizing. And I think that's kind of a dangerous space to be in. And so that's when everything kind of came together. And on Tuesday, we had this huge kind of dialogue and venting session and shared experiences and questions and answers. And, you know, for me, it was important to make sure that at the end of the semester, you all came out of this maybe a little battered and bruised, but feeling like, you know, you took something from this experience that can help you navigate through what the world is kind of putting in front of you right now. You know, all of this is very unprecedented. It's bizarre. It's crazy. And to ask students to not only live through this and process it, but then to work and cover it, it's an impossible task to ask of a professional journalist, let alone students who are learning this craft. And so for me, it was important to make sure that from a mental health standpoint, that you all were okay and that you all can understand where each other's headspace was at. Because I think if you didn't have that understanding, it would have been hard to move forward to create content when you have groups of people that are on the staff that are just really hurting and struggling to figure out these emotions that they're feeling. And so, you know, for me, that was important. And, you know, I really wasn't asking anyone if I could do it. I was like, I just want to find out what day would be best. You know, and most of you who know me, I don't really ever ask for permission. I always ask for forgiveness.
I think you used the word hijack when you said
I did. I said to Gerard and Mima, I said, hey, I want to hijack the class on Tuesday. And he was like, can we use a less aggressive word? I was like,
you can do it. I'm happy with it. Please come in.
Yeah, I was like, no, I'm going to hijack the class.
I just want to, that was the single best day of education I've ever experienced in 6 decades, you know, and I am so glad you did that. You know, I think that was the most important thing I've ever seen happen in a classroom. It was so important to the staff. I'm really glad you came in to do that.
I'm just glad everyone had a chance to share. I mean, you know, the thing that I didn't know was going to happen or not is if people would have the courage to share.
Yeah.
You know, and that's why I went first. I was like, let me go first. Let me, you know, kick things off, make people feel like it's okay to share, right? Because it's rare that you hear your professor share anything personal about, you know, what they're going through or, you know, how they're processing things or any of that. And you hear that, and, you know, my hope was that someone would be like, well, okay, if our professor can, you know, take the wall down and share and be vulnerable, maybe I can too. You know, so I didn't know how deep people would get, you know, so the tears and the frustrations and the anger and all of that, it was so refreshing to see the courage in the room.
Yeah, I agree. I have 2 students from the Corsair that are in my Photo 13 class, and I did my best to repeat what you did in the morning, and they actually led, and they already knew how to do it. You know, you broke the ice. They were able to like help their other students open up about what their experiences were also. So it had longer legs than just that morning. You know,
that's great.
I think it's gonna resonate with students for a long time that they had that conversation. So.
That experience from my perspective is something I will completely always carry with me, and exactly what Gerard said, by far the most powerful class experience I've ever had. But it's fascinating because the Corsair itself in person can kind of invoke that power in different ways, in unspoken ways, being in the room together, creating things that you know you created together. And so to think that potentially the most impactful class session of my life was on a Zoom call, I think just speaks to the weirdness of right now, but kind of the amazing parts of it all in that sense. I think that that barrier can allow people to feel more comfortable to speak their minds.
Mm-hmm.
And Sharyn, kind of coming into the class on the later end of things, also coming into the class once we were already online, and then advising this class through so many unexpected twists and turns. How has that experience kind of been for you? How have you felt like you've settled in?
So as professors, we we have the course material that we're supposed to cover, right? And we have our experiences. So for journalism, right, we've all worked as journalists, so we're able to tell, the stories from back in the day, etc. We had a conversation. I mean, these kinds of heavy, important, heartfelt conversations, like after Trump was elected, a lot of us had these sort of conversations in our classes. And I think some professors didn't, but a lot of professors did. And I think because you have to acknowledge that we're not living in a bubble, your academic life is not hermetically sealed from the rest of your life. And so I think when we shifted to Zoom, I think professors were nervous about doing that kind of conversation on a Zoom call as opposed to doing it in person in class. I mean, I'll just tell you, like, some professors had online discussions, like a discussion thread where people shared stuff. I didn't do that because I felt like those kinds of online discussions sometimes can go off the rails real easy, or someone can type something that can be misunderstood because people can't see the tone of voice that the person meant it in and that kind of thing. So I didn't do that. So only with my J2 class did we have we had been having similar discussions, and then had a discussion. As far as coming into the class kind of mid-semester, I think that there's a lot of work that was done before I got there, which I really appreciate, as far as the editors knowing their roles and being confident and having a plan. So I really appreciated that aspect of it, that I could kind of, teach about the finer things in journalism writing, or some of the, keep in mind the stuff that they can get from you that they can't get anywhere else. Like, I could hit on the finer things because I wasn't in charge of setting up everything at the beginning of the semester. So that was kind of nice. And I also appreciated that so many students stayed super active in the class for the whole semester. And in fact, some of the students who had been less active earlier in the semester, like, really stepped up the second half of the semester. And so that's a testament just to how seriously students took the Corsair and took kind of their role. Because, y'all are documenting campus history that, future generations of students who want to know what happened at SMC during this time will go back and look at what you've covered. So you have an amazing role. And so the way that I saw it, my job was to take something that was already amazing. We hit some finer things that I think people will be looking for when they judge contests and stuff like that. But also just to be honest, to not mess anything up for future, for when Ashanti comes back in the fall, you know what I mean?
We gave you the keys to a shiny car. What happened?
That's right. But also just provide the support and the positive feedback as much as possible.
Gerard, we think of being a war correspondent as getting on a jet aircraft, traveling to another continent, and risking your life and covering the challenges in some other country. Today, in the streets of the cities of America, a journalist could be injured by the police. A journalist could be injured by protesters. A journalist might not be touched by anyone, but might come home having contracted coronavirus. And even if none of those things happen, they might witness something that will be etched on their brain for the rest of their life. This is a time of incredible opportunities for reporting. There's so much reporting to be done, but there is risks for journalists in America. How do you manage all that?
Gosh, that's a tough question. My own experiences were I had no training and just went the training was kind of you pass fail, because it seems simpler that way. You either live or you die. My advice now to students is be emotionally prepared, be physically prepared, and try to be as equipped as well as possible, which is tough because we have no budget for helmets and body armor and, gas masks and stuff like that, which they should have. That's what professionals want to have when they're out there. But on the other hand, they're kind of stepping up to the plate and doing their risk assessment. We've been advising them, get out, don't go or get out, before things get hot. But that idea of, do I need to go to a foreign country to see conflict? No, it's always right here. It's always right in your backyard if you know how to look for it. But it's extraordinary times that we're living through right now. And I'm always amazed, and this is not the first time students have stepped up to really big stories and operated at a professional level. And it's happening again. And I'm always enthralled by the thought that, completely ordinary folks, people who, regular students, can just suddenly do remarkable stuff. And I've been seeing that happening all semester. We are big advocates of take care of yourself mentally, know that there's going to be some sort of fallout. You don't know what it's going to be. And, take advantage of the resources that are available, just to start talking through it before, it begins to have some negative toll on you.
For all of you, whether it's journalism going forward or specifically the Corsair going forward into the fall, we'll still be virtually online. In the spring, who knows? But even when we get back in the newsroom, how do you think that these times may impact the Corsair and journalism in general?
I mean, I think the Corsair has shown, you guys were basically thrown into a gauntlet as an organization. And, Gerard and I, when we kind of had the realization, I think it was before the institution even decided that we were going to go fully online in the spring, when we had the realization that we were probably going to go online, we had started to kind of make plans. And to be honest, we didn't know if it was going to work. We didn't know how much of the staff was going to stay. We knew we were dealing with a pandemic, so it wasn't a situation where they could go out and cover stories, So this was really a pilot for us to see if the Corsair could still function in a digital world, a 100% digital world.
Yeah.
And I think what we found was that it could. And so, going to the fall, I think that we have, some lessons that we've learned, and we have some best practices that we can implement. But I will say this, even when we're back on the ground, it's never going to be the same. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, because I think what this semester has taught the organization is that through extraordinary times, it is possible to be able to tell good stories and create content that can help the readership, the students, the staff, the faculty, even, podcasts like the one that you're doing right now. This podcast is now on the radar of the president of the institution. She sees value in it. And I think that stripping away everything that we were doing allowed the organization to figure out how to tell stories that really matter and that affect people and that can help people through difficult times. And I think if we can keep that as a core value of the Corsair and how they approach creating content, I think that this whole situation can make the Corsair better. It's the silver lining to the dark cloud that we really have to pay attention to. And I think we have to take advantage of the fact that we were pushed in that direction and really embrace it instead of saying, let's just go back to the way things were. I think we'd be doing the students in the future and the students of the past a disservice to just go back to business as usual once we are back on ground on campus.
We're making legend. We're making the legend of what is the Corsair and raising the bar for what comes next. And the online stuff, I was lucky that I just finished online teaching over winter. So I had a bunch of strategies ready to go. And at the core of it is, how do you maintain community, in this particular kind of environment? And I think we were really successful at making sure that everybody kept communicating. Everybody was on board with stuff. Nobody got left behind when we I made phone calls to everybody. The minute we were shut down, it's nobody can be dropped. Nobody can feel like they're alone in the world. We've got to make sure they know that they're still part of an organization. And as the advisors, we're that glue that kind of holds everybody together. and we all kind of pulled together and made that happen. And I don't think that's going away, whether we're in the classroom or, doing this online. I think it was a really, like, Ashanti and Sharyn, you guys have really been, like, instrumental in making sure that the organization keeps working. And then, Jack and Jackie, man, you guys are such a powerful team of leadership there that, the whole thing kind of comes together.
Thank you. Sharyn, I would love to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Well, I won't be in charge of the Corsair in the fall.
This is true.
Sharon's like, take it back, take it back.
But you're part of the legend now.
Exactly.
One of the things, and I've been learning about newsletters, right? And that's being an option for the Corsair in the fall, to do a newsletter in addition to, so that you're sending out the news as you're posting it and doing the PDFs and everything. I hope in the future that we have an audience engagement class that is tied into the Corsair that maybe, I would teach or someone else would teach. And so then that could be a way, because it brings me back a little bit to my college days when I was on the college paper. I teach the intro classes, I teach the intermediate classes, but it's something different, with the students who are actually producing content for the public. And I do think it's exciting to see the PDFs when they come out. It's exciting to share with people on campus, which y'all have been doing. And so in that sense, for the fall, I am encouraged for the future of our profession. And I'm just encouraged for the future of the United States, because I feel like there are some very talented people coming into their own power, understanding their own power, wanting to make change, wanting to improve things. And as a relatively old person, right, that makes me encouraged for the future.
You all as faculty have been, no doubt, overwhelmed with, the transition was what? We had a week at most to go from face-to-face to online. And I'm sure you've been incredibly busy, even if you don't have new kids. Ashanti, you... With all of that, Ashanti and Gerard and Sharyn, have you had any sort of downtime to reflect on life and where you're heading? And have you come to any conclusions about your mission on this earth, or the way you're existing here?
I will say this: I see a therapist every week without fail, regardless, because I think it keeps me grounded and it keeps my perspective, more 50,000 feet instead of 3,000 feet. So I've had an opportunity to reflect every week since this has happened. And I think that that's been helpful, right? Because, it feels like every week there's something else, right? Like at one point we were supposed to have, killer hornets in this country.
That's right.
You know what I mean? Like,
what point was that?
Right. And then there was like a lion that escaped from a zoo at one point. It was just like, oh, come on, so, I mean, it's one of those things where, I always stress to students to exercise self-care and to take care of their mental health. And I preach it because I do it. And I think especially with what's going on, it's so important to figure out an outlet to be able to process all of this stuff in a way that isn't overwhelming, because it can be. I mean, I thought the pandemic was going to be the craziest thing that happened in the last several months. Who knew, right? Who knew? Nobody could have, anticipated that all of these things would be happening at once. We have protests in every single state in the country. That's never happened. While we also still have a pandemic, right? So all of these people that are at these protests, standing up for injustices and calling for justice, may end up with the coronavirus in 2 weeks. I mean, it's nuts.
Worth their life.
It's crazy, the world we're living in right now.
I just heard that George Floyd was posthumously diagnosed
with coronavirus, right? It's like, what? In this bizarro world, I've learned how important self-care is, because I think without these weekly sessions that I would normally have, even if we weren't in a pandemic and we didn't have, the protests that were going on, I would still be doing. It's crazy. It's bizarre world we're living in right now. And being a Black female, it's, compounded, further compounded, right? you have to see the silver linings and the good things in life, right? Like Sharyn and I just, found out that 100% it's official. We are both tenured. You have to hold on to things like that and say, okay.
That just happened?
Yeah, the board voted last night, Tuesday night to approve our tenure status. So we are both officially tenured professors. And
now
so it's like
being nice to students.
Yeah, my husband was like, well, now you don't have to try so hard. And I was like, that's just in my DNA. But, it's little things like that you have to say, okay, you know what? I'm going to take some time to celebrate this because this is a bright spot in everything that's going on right now. So I'm going to focus on that for a bit. So yeah, I mean, that's something that I would suggest everyone do. Figure out where the bright spots are, take some time to relish in those.
Sharyn, any life reconsiderations during this time?
So I have spent a lot of time with this guy right here, right? And he was nice enough to stay off his iPad for the podcast. But, anyway, I have a new appreciation for my husband, right? Who's been helping me work so many long hours by like being in charge of most of David's piano, and he's been making meals and stuff like that. So
wait, what?
What?
Anyway, and what? No, and I have a new appreciation for you, who just finished second grade, right? He finished all his second grade homework. He's already doing third grade math and stuff like that. So I would say I appreciate what I have, and I also count myself as very lucky too, right? Because I know for people that are quarantining alone, or, I talked to my dad, who's older and is very scared about what the coronavirus could mean for him. So it is true. You count your blessings, right? So I appreciate that.
Gerard?
I work really hard during the week, and then I try to get it all done so I can focus on going through the garage fire stuff. Half my life's work and negatives was in there, so I was trying to rescue stuff. And for sort of relieving the pressure, I'm with Ashanti. I still see a therapist once a week. And in the early days of the pandemic, I was reaching out to every single friend and relative and trying to send a joke a week, funny observation a week, because that was kind of enlivening. But in recent weeks, there's nothing funny. Everything is deadly serious right now. But just doing more, just keep trying to do a good job is really all I really hope to do.
Ashanti Blaize-Hopkins, Sharyn Obsatz, and Gerard Burkhart, thanks for visiting the Pandemic Podcast.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks. It was very interesting. Thank you.
It's a real pleasure. I'm glad I could be a part of this.
Be safe, be well, and continue to express your humanity.
Thank you.
And check in every Wednesday and Friday for new episodes of the Pandemic Podcast.